At a certain age, todo te duele, right? Did you ever see that movie, Milagro Beanfield War?
Oh, yes.
Se levanta el viejito, and he looks in the mirror and he says, "Thank you, God, for letting me have one more day." That's kind of how I feel now, you know. One more day, thank you, you know. You know what's interesting about that movie is sometimes when we talk about, you know, what is Chicano and what isn't. I don't know if you know this or not, but Milagro Beanfield War is about Chicanos in northern New Mexico, Trucha, to be precise. And yet, it was written by an Anglo. It was directed by Robert Redford. The star is from Argentina. The other star is from Cuba. And one of the other stars is from Puerto Rico.
The author of the book is Anglo.
Yeah, Mike Nichols is the other. So the only guy who's Mexicano at all is the old man who gets up. So when I teach or when I talk to classes, I say, so is that a Chicano movie or is that a book about Chicanos?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that's kind of what the theme is tonight is that, you know, what is Chicano poetry? I've been involved in the movement since 1968, and a lot has changed since then. You know, and one of the things that I want to talk about is those changes. That's why the name of the program is called The Evolution of Chicano Poetry, starting from the early days in the 60s up to now, which is represented by these two folks here. Mine and Juliana's poetry is from Juliana's poetry, for lack of a better word, is from the old school.
Yeah.
And so we're not trying to compare and contrast, merely to study and trace the evolution up to the present day, because things are different now. Issues are different. Issues are more,
Sure.
I think, in a lot of ways, the issues are more urgent now, because the country is so divided, you know. So that's kind of what we're gonna talk about tonight, you know, and I just thought I'd give a little preview of
Did you want to wait for?
They're about probably 20 minutes away. They were still at home. They thought it was 6:30.
Maybe we should.
You wanna go
start?
ahead and get started and he can go
Yeah.
last?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Alright. Okay.
Cause you gotta go back to Denver, right?
Yeah, I have to drive back to Denver and I'm viejito, so I can't drive at night. I can't say, estoy ciego en la noche.
Say that once more, I'm gonna have to go with you. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce to you the cast of The Evolution of Chicano Poetry, which is the brainchild of our moderator, Ricardo LaFore, who is a 50-year veteran of the Chicano movement. He started out in Los Animas speaking out for students who wanted to have an event at their high school celebrating Cinco de Mayo. And he went before the school board and was roundly condemned for it. He'll tell you a little bit more about it. But this was his concept. They've had this in Denver, and it was very, very well received by the community. It's when he introduced the idea to me, what he said was this. He said the old school Chicano poets were poets. They were Chicanos. They were men. And at that time, women, and he says women were not, there weren't any women poets. I assure you there were women poets. But because the men were the ones who stood in front of the cameras with the microphone, that's why we say there were no women poets. One of the women poets that I know, that we know here in Pueblo, is Dr. Bernice Zamora, who taught at the university, taught at Stanford, and she was one of the first ones at Riverside, UC Riverside, University of California Riverside, that taught Chicano studies. And she said she'd have to go home and write out poems and things for the next day's class, because there weren't any books, there weren't any things out there. The poets that were out there were speaking. So it was oral, it was audio. So it wasn't like it is today where you got poets that are media that are electronic, but they're not in print. So old school, and the way Ricardo described it, is from the olden days, probably, what?
60s, 70s,
60s.
60s and 70s.
And old school tends to also do the written form. Juliana has, how many books? Tell me.
90. I have 2 poetry books, a chapbook, and I'm working on a murder mystery.
Ooh.
And
fiction.
I'm published in anthologies and literary magazines, but I have 2.
Yes, yes, yes. I was trying to make it 5.
Yeah,
because
that's
it's all
okay.
those different things. So, Ricardo is going to introduce our poets, and we don't say poetesses anymore, which I'm grateful for. You're happy about that? You're not a poetess.
There's like
You're
an
a poet.
actress,
Yeah.
an actor is an actor.
Actor.
Not an
Yes.
actress.
And our empty seat is for Frank Arteaga, who is an old-time, also old-time poet. But again, he has no written material because it was all auditory. It was all, or else it's in the La Cucaracha, or it's in the student group was called CUFA, Chicanos Unidos for Action. Crazy. Anyway, CUFA was the Chicano group, and he was up there. In their newsletter, he put a little piece of his poetry. I also need to tell you that this is sponsored by Pueblo History Museum because they give us this beautiful space, and it's nice acoustics. Also sponsored by El Movimiento Sigue here in town, which is Rita Martinez's old organization that has come forward, and we're now going toward nonprofit status. And it's also sponsored by the 50-year-old Chicano Studies program at the university, headed by Judy Baca, who is going to be leaving us. So we have to be very outspoken about Chicano studies in our high schools and also in the university. We need it to be there. And you'll hear from this group why Chicano studies needs to be there at the high school and at the college level. So I'll guide Frank in to have his seat here. And also, we have prepared for you some additional information about Mr. LaFore. And I think your poem is included in this.
Yeah, the first poem the first protest poem after I got spanked by the school board. I'm not gonna get into that because it's in there, but suffice to say that what happened was that a group of Chicano students asked me to be their spokesman, there he is, for celebrating Cinco de Mayo. This is 1969. And so I went before the school board with the students, and they were taken aback. They said, why in the world would you want to celebrate a Mexican holiday? Don't you feel like you're an American? What's wrong with the 4th of July, blah, blah, blah. And they gave me a really hard time. And there was like 300 people were there, but they had showed up because the word had gone out that I was trying to radicalize their kids, okay? I was trying to make them into communists and things like that. And so they asked for all the people who wanted to condemn what I was trying to do to rise. And all 300 people stood up and shot me down. And there I am, completely humiliated before the whole town. Anyway, that's what happened, and that's what that is. You can read that at your leisure. I'd rather start the official part of the program. You can read that as you go along. Everything that I say in there is true. That actually happened to me. It was I guess for lack of a better word, my baptism of fire, or as I call it there, my looking into the abyss moment. You look into the abyss and there's nothing looking back at you. In that moment, you find out who you are. because you're all alone. You're alone, you know, this is it, you know, what am I gonna do? Do I turn around, turn tail, and walk away, or do I stay and fight? And in that moment, I guess you could say, in that moment, I was reborn as a Chicano. And that was 53 years ago, and I'm still trying to do what I can. I can't do the things I used to do because I'm old. I walked from Pueblo to Denver one time for farm workers down in the valley. But now it's hard to walk up a flight of stairs. So I can't do the things I used to do, but the one thing I can still do is talk, okay? And I'm pretty good at that. I can still talk, and I can teach, and I can tell you about the history as I saw it, not only as I saw it, as I lived it, okay? So, but I digress. Deborah had asked me to read a poem to start. I wanted to dedicate this event because I think this is the first of an event, and if the word gets out that you learned something and that you enjoyed it, the next time we have it, we'll pack this house, okay? Do you all know Rita Martinez? You all know who she was? She was a Chicana here from Pueblo who was very involved in the anti-Columbus Day celebration. She was a terrific woman, and she sat on the advisory committee to the Chicano Movement exhibit at the History Museum in Denver. And she died a couple of years ago prematurely. Did she die? I think she died of COVID. I think she was an early victim of COVID. But she was a terrific lady, and I couldn't come to the funeral, but I did what I could. I wrote a poem for her, okay? And I'd like to read it, and I'd like to dedicate this evening to Rita Martinez, a true champion and a true warrior in the Chicano movement who died. It was nothing to apologize for. She was truly a warrior, okay? So this is called simply Rita. Rita, your name rises above the steel city. Your love and commitment help make it a real city. Now, La Gente hangs its head in sorrow, knowing you won't be here tomorrow. The pine trees bend in the distance. They did so at your insistence. Take your place. Blessed peace, blessed rest. Now, as then, you were the best. You were the nemesis of tyrants. They feared your name. You stood your ground, all the same, not in vain. So now we're left to wonder what else you might have done, but through it all, Rita, you were the one. And now you gladly pass the torch. Go rest easy on your porch. Write a poem, so what if it doesn't rhyme? You have done enough to last a lifetime. Rita, your name rhymes with affection, salvation, and redemption. We mourn today, the movement has lost a champion. About 5 years ago, I was invited to sit on a panel at North High School and on education. And before the program started, a young man got up and read a poem in a style that I was not familiar with. It was called slam poetry. Y'all familiar with slam poetry? And I always had thought, wrongly so, that slam poetry was kind of like young Chicanos trying to emulate blacks, being gangsters, being rappers and so forth. And I didn't really pay attention to it. I thought it was kind of. But as I listened to this young man's words, as I listened to the words that he used in his poetry, it was pure Chicano, pure Chicano. The message was pure Chicano. It was something that I said, you know what? I said, I haven't been paying attention. The world has changed. It's not about old school poetry now. This is the new wave. This is how the world has changed. And we have to accept that. And if you don't accept the world as it changes, it leaves you behind. So I became a kind of a fan of that. So I started researching more and listening to more poets who wrote in this style. And I became a fan of slam poetry, particularly the slam poetry that people of this age write about, you know. And it occurred to me that the world has changed. And we were very parochial during the Chicano movement, in the sense that we were only concerned about ourselves, you know. We were all about Chicano this, Chicano doing this for la raza. And what I sensed that changed a little bit was that the new poets were concerned more with a universal theme. Not just justice for us, justice for everybody. Justice for gays, justice for transgender, justice for undocumented in DACA and the dreamers and the environment. And they were concerned about things like this, which are good things to be concerned about, but not something that we really thought about back in the Chicano movement. We were more focused on our own community and didn't really reach out to others. So because of that, I started thinking about how things have changed since my time to the present, and that's really what we're here to talk about tonight. We're going to have two poets from the old school, two poets from the new school. We're going to have them each read a poem that they think is indicative of how they feel. And then I'm going to ask a few questions designed to just keep the dialogue moving. And at the end, I want to inquire from you your questions and answers. And that really is, for me, it's really the favorite part of any presentation I do, is to hear from you how it made you feel, or do you have any questions about it? Because then, based on your feedback, sometimes I'll change a program to say, hey, next time, let's use the question that she had. And we continue to learn and we continue to grow. I'm almost an octogenarian. Without telling you exactly how old I am, I'm getting close up there to the big 80. And my time is past, and so I'm really kind of leaving it all in the hands of these folks. But at the same time, respecting what has happened and where we've been. And we can't know where we're going until we know where we've been, right? So that's kind of what I want to start with. And let me start with Antonio. What I'd like you all to do is just share a little bit about yourself with the audience, and then launch into one of your poems, okay? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Antonio Trujillo, right?
Yes, sir.
Please,
Okay.
take it away.
My name is Antonio Trujillo. I was born and raised here in Pueblo, Colorado. I am an artist, producer, engineer. I've been making music ever since I was young, and writing poetry as well. That's what my main outlet is for my poetry. My music has always been an outlet for me to express how I feel, and also more the way that I do write, and with it is it's more of lessons and things that I understand, and morals and values, and I try to put it into my music in ways that other people can understand it, of how it would affect their lives, and how that they would be able to implement it into their lives and their routine. And yeah, I started writing poetry when I was about 8 or 9, and it just started out with like love poems and things like that for friends and stuff. And then I started writing music, and after that I started DJing and like rapping and stuff, messing around with different softwares. And my dad and my mom, they used to like a lot of old Chicano music, and my family, that was always a big thing in our family, was Chicano music and lowrider oldies and stuff like that at all of our family events. So I fell in love with the culture, and yeah, I haven't been a big part of the protests or the activism stuff in the Chicano movement, but I was in Chicano studies in school, and I did learn about everything in the history, and it's moved me, and I could just see how my music relates with it a lot. And yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll start with one of my poems. This is actually, I wanted to do something.
If you want to get up in front, that's fine. share with us?
Yeah, I'm gonna do something different. This is actually, I like to remix songs, and I like to, with music that people do write, like with the remixes and stuff, I'll make them more positive and I'll write it in the aspect of how I feel about it. A lot of, I don't know if any of you know, you might know, I know my sister, and XX Tentacion, he's a rapper that died a couple years ago. His music was, he was trying to spread a positive aspect on his life and be really positive, but he was a tormented youth and he did have a lot of demons and things that he battled with and that had kept him down and things like that. And I just wrote a different remix on his song, and I'll go ahead and that'll be my poem. I named it I Come Alive in the Nighttime. Times are changing, I don't sleep at night. It's been a moment since I realized many times it was hard just to look back in your eyes. I stay awake just to stay attached. I have to keep my mind in wraps. The moment I'm not next to you, I'm so passive aggressive. I ruin every relationship I've been through, codependent just to feel a touch. I believed ever since I was young, man, I felt tough. Now I knock on every door that I pass. Age don't get to change with time. Old soul, you can't change my mind. I manifest my greatness to achieve my best. I'll take my losses, I don't see regret. Times are changing, I don't sleep at night. It's been a moment since I realized it's hard to look back in your eyes. I come alive in the nighttime. 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 I'm gonna thrive at the right time. This gonna thrive at the right time. Enough drive keeps my grind past the nighttime. Enough drive keeps my grind past the nighttime. I'm gonna thrive at the right time. This gonna thrive at the right time.
There it is. In the beginning, before Chicano's poetry came out, I recall being, say, 16 years old in high school, and I loved poetry, but my teacher had me read Walt Whitman and Robert Frost and Carl Sandburg, which is fine. They're fine poets in their own right. In fact, they're tremendous poets. But I never saw a poem by a Chicano. I never saw a piece of art by a Chicano. It was all Eurocentric, you know? And the teachers would imply, it seemed to be, what they were saying is that Chicanos were incapable of loftier pursuits such as the fine arts or fine literature. Because I never saw it, I never heard it, so I didn't know it was there. All that changed when one man named Corky Gonzalez wrote a poem called I Am Joaquin. And Joaquin, if you never read it, please read it, because it starts at the very beginning when Cortez lands in Veracruz, Mexico in 1419. And those Spaniards who came here didn't have their women with them. They married Indian women. And that is the genesis of our culture, our bloodline. We're mestizos. Spanish father, Indian mother. That's who we are. And Corky starts there, and he takes it all the way to the Chicano movement. He goes through all the phases. And Joaquin is not just one identity, it's many identities. He says, for example, I am the Aztec prince, but I'm also the fat political coyote who sells his people out behind their backs. We are all of those things, and we are blended into one called Joaquin. But Joaquin is a savior, it's a prayer, it's a fervent prayer, telling people, you cannot escape who you are. This is who you are. So Joaquin for me became a roadmap. It became like a syllabus for my own life. And I remember as I was reading it, and I didn't know a lot of the names, Cuauhtémoc, Moctezuma, and Francisco Madero, Diaz, Huerta, all these names were brand new to me, but they were all part of the history that we were leading us from then up until, and so Joaquin became the catalyst for me to want to know more. And the thing that probably more than anything is Joaquin took us back to our Indio roots, okay? He emphasized that, the Aztec part of us, the Mayan part of us. And yes, we are Spanish, yes, but we're Indian too. And one of the things in those early days of the Movimiento was the fact that women were kind of left out. They weren't, they were there, like Deborah says, they were there, they just weren't in print. So when the Chicanas really started coming out and writing their poetry, it made the art form of Chicano poetry complete. It became a legitimate art form because Chicanas and Chicanos were both writing the poetry. And with that, I'd like to introduce a Chicana from the old school who writes and actually embraces her Indio side. And of course, you know, this is Juliana. Fatula, Aragon.
It's Juliana Aragon Fatula.
Okay.
But that's okay, you can call me whatever you want. I am happy to be here because Pueblo is my community. This is what I call home. So I want to start off with a song, a little celebration. Anna, hey, Anna, hey, Anna, hey, oh. Anna, hey, Anna, hey, Anna, hey, oh. Anne, Anne, oh, Anne, Anne, oh. Anne, Anne, oh, Anne, Anne, oh. Anna, hey, Anna, hey, Anna, hey, oh. Anna, hey, Anna, hey, Anna, hey, oh. I can't sing, but that doesn't stop me. I wrote down a few things because being an old school poet is because I'm old. And all my friends are old and old school poets, so I forget things. So I wrote down a few things that I want to say to you today. I write the truth. Even though the truth hurts, it also heals. I am a confessional poet. My stories and poems reveal my dark past as a survivor. In 1970, I met Corky Gonzalez at a Denver Brown Beret meeting, and his speech changed my life. I became a social activist. My freshman year in high school, I organized students and protested for women's rights. What did we want? We wanted the right to wear blue jeans to school like the boys. We had to wear the polyester matching pantsuits back then. We refused to return to the classroom until we won. In 1972, I left Colorado and my tiny racist town, Canyon City, and moved to San Francisco, California. I went from listening to the Beatles to listening to Santana, War, Kool and the Gang. I wore bell bottoms and platform shoes and had waist-length hair. I was a hippie. I enjoyed the cultural diversity of the Bay Area. When I returned to Colorado, I brought my music, fashion, and social activism with me. In the 80s and 90s, I lived in Denver. I performed with Su Teatro, a Chicano cultural arts center, and learned about Chicano history from the veteranos, Tony Garcia, Yolanda Arteaga, Deborah Gallegos, Sherry Coca Candelaria, Manuel Roybal Sr., Lalo Delgado. We protested for social justice, Amnesty International, against police brutality, justice for janitors, and here in Pueblo, on Pinche Columbus Day. So I have a poem that I'd like to read for you. It's an ekphrastic prose poem. It's called Sin Fronteras, and it's after a painting by the great artist Carlos Almaraz's Night Magic Blue Jester, 1988, oil on canvas. And this poem first appeared in Western Humanities Review in 2019. She don't regret nothing. Don't apologize for a thing. An alcoholic, high school dropout, hippie, cowgirl, Indian, la mexica, la mestiza, la India, la Llorona, la Virgen de Guadalupe, pocha, misfit, statistic, survivor of sexual and domestic abuse, survivor of I should be dead, but I'm still here. rebel, la Chicana feminist, la student, la teacher, la writer, la hita, la jester. She yells at the crowd at the bus stop, "Don't call me Hispanic or girl, 'cause I'm a woman. La mujer, la chola, la vata, la chingona." Between many worlds, she lives sin fronteras. She stumbles onto the bus and rides through the north side of Denver, sees house after house for sale. The cantinas, gone. The segunda, replaced with gently used shops. The dark night streets flashing red lights. Police versus barrio boys. Candlelight in windows flicker like falling stars, fallen angels, gangbangers, hookers. Her comunidad speaks Galo. Orale, vato! Simón, hermano. Ay, te guacho. Esale, a toda madre. The new neighbors speak English only, arrive in Hummers and Subarus. The gardens where the flowers once bloomed silver, azure, peony pink, hollyhock white, Indian corn, now a parking lot. She stares out of the window of the bus. She doesn't recognize a soul. Where are her people? Where have la gente gone? Why did they leave? She gets off at the stop in front of her old house. While she was sleeping, it disappeared. Poof, like that. She asks a stranger passing by, "Excuse me, mister, what happened to the people who lived here?" He says, very matter of fact, "The couple died. Mr. and Mrs. James Harris bought the house." She stands until she can't, and then sits on the curb. "How long was I locked up? What day is it?" She feels like she's in a black and white movie that's been digitalized and technicolored. The magnetism and zeal of that time turned into a bad Disney film. The Harrises were not the Romeros, nor the Martinezes, nor the Valdezes. She laughs and says, "I've come home to casi nada. No gente, no carnalismo, no le hace. El barrio es agringado." The neighbor's house with the front porch swing, revamped into an art gallery with a mural painted on the brick wall. It reminds her of the last painting she saw. What was the name of it? The Blue Fool? No. Blue Jester? Night Magic. She lifts her head to the heavens, sees it clearly in the dark blue clouds, rips of color in random shapes, triangles, spheres, silhouettes of faces, smears of light cast shadows. The black skyline turns blue, dilapidated buildings in decay. The artist hides in the corner and paints the velvety darkness. The crippled man wears his Panama and carries an umbrella to keep the stars from falling on his skull. The blue jester lifts her halo to the cityscape. The second blue jester frowns into the mirror. The ceiling collapses. He tries to hold it up with his left hand. The pit bull, silent but attentive, sits in the smoke. The homeless man sneaks and peeks from the alley. The red hue of taverns behind him like flames. The flashing police car lights wash the buildings in yellow, orange, green, red. They throb like the heartbeats of the city. She listens to the wind and hears her mother's voice. "Listen, you've been gone too long. Everything changes, everything evolves. Like the day turns into night, like young turns into old. Remember? Those were your words. That's what you told me when I asked where you were going. Out in the night, Mama. Out into the blue magic night.
Poetry, I'm sure you all know that, but poetry is often visceral. By that I mean, it's just about how you feel. It doesn't pretend to have rhyme or meter or structure. It's all about feelings, and this is a visceral poem. This is how you truly feel. And it has no message other than, this is it. Ahí está, tómala. And that's just how it is. And so I always feel like that poetry is visceral. It doesn't require any explanation whatsoever other than how you feel. And so I had to say that because there are certain parts of a poem that kind of stand out for me, and it's Sin Fronteras has always been a theme of mine. And there is, right now in the state legislature, there's going to be a bill that is being promoted by the Colorado Department of Education, and it's going to require a new change or a new way in which we teach social studies. I urge you to keep an eye on that, because what I would like to happen is for the history of our people to be told correctly in the schools, beginning in the schools, so that by the time you graduate high school, you have a pretty good idea of who you are, and you haven't been lied to George Washington and the cherry tree. You have to know, Chicanos have to know, and all people have to know that prior to 1846, Pueblo was part of Mexico. And it wasn't until that war was over, the Mexican-American War, that we became Americans. But before that, we were Mexicans. People don't know that. So when people say, for example, the border, we didn't cross the border crossed us, it was a clever slogan, but it's more true than not true. We didn't move anywhere. One day we're living in Alamosa, Colorado, we're Mexican, the next day we're American because we've been annexed. We have no say in it. But they said, hey, if you want to be Mexican, you have to travel like 300 miles and cross the border. We didn't put that border there. That border just appeared. So I urge you to take a look at this, what's happening in the Colorado schools now. They're gonna have to, if this passes, they're gonna have to change the way they teach. And that's a good thing for us, and we need to push that. If it ever comes up on the ballot, we need to vote for it. We need to be involved in these kinds of things because they affect our lives. I'm digressing from there, but I did want to throw that in because of the visceral poem brought to mind that whole this is how we feel. We're not apologizing for it. This is just how we feel. Okay. I'd like to turn it over to our other new school poet, and I don't want to butcher your name again, so please explain to the folks who you are and share your poem.
Tziavii Tanikatu Minania Nuta Buspikara. Hello everyone, my name is Tziavii. My name is actually Tziavii Tanikatu, and it means the wild rose in Paiute. So I'm half Chicana and I'm half Native, 100% indigenous, because in my eyes it's the same thing. A little bit about myself. I'm a local activist. Well, I would say more revolutionary. I've been to protest in a lot of different states. I've been to Wisconsin and California a good amount of times. I love going to protests. I'm also a Brown Beret, so I do security. I protect the people when I'm at the protests. It feels like I have a lot of hats. So one of the things that I do in the community is I work at a heritage museum. So I teach people who come in the door about Colorado's heritage, Colorado's history and Colorado's culture, stuff like that. Let me see. I've been involved with Take It Down. I don't know if any of you know what the Take It Down movement is, but we're trying to remove a Columbus statue, which I feel like is a Chicano cause and a native cause, because to me it's an indigenous cause. It's bold, and so I do what the only reason I do what I do is in honor of Rita. If I think that she would tell me like, hey, do this, I imagine her voice still, and I do it. So in my eyes, she's just as present with me as she was in mine, and I still call her my leader, and I haven't been able to find a leader since then. So I've been feeling a little lost, I'll be honest, but I'm just grateful I've had so many mentors. Like they were mentioning they met Chuy. He was one of my mentors. Danzante. I've been a danzante my whole life, and I've also been dancing for the community my whole life. So I've already put in 3 decades of work of dancing at schools, communities, doing workshops. My family has dedicated our lives actually to the community, and we teach Aztec dancing here at the museum every Tuesday, so if you're interested, let me know. And we teach for free. We would never charge anybody for their culture, you know? And it's actually an open group, so that's something a little different, but we feel like if it really helps us, why shut the door, or why be the gatekeepers over something that's good medicina? So, okay, I guess I'll get into it. So, my poetry is usually political, or it's emotional, like because of my emotions. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm sad, so I have to put it into a song, otherwise it's gonna fester in me, and it's gonna hurt me. So music has always been my outlet, but before music was my outlet, poetry was at the poetry slams. So I've turned a couple of my poems into songs that you all could find on Reverb Nation YouTube. Just come up to me and let me know. The one I'm gonna do today talks about a lover who had passed away, and everyone told me, they're like, write him a letter, and I was like, I can't, I just can't pick up the pen right now. But what I was able to do was I was able to write a poem in my head. So one thing about poetry, just as a reminder in case you want to follow this path, is all you have to do is just ignite a feeling in other people. Like if you're sad and they feel sadness, give them a snap, you know? So if it's a happy poem and it uplifts you, you know, share it with people. So I'm gonna go ahead and share Preston's letter in his honor. So we'll go to the front. Sometimes the truth is a little bit hard to hear. I remember listening to Immortal Technique growing up, but sometimes it's also necessary. Somehow I feel like your spirit left me alone. You whispered, T, it's time for you to move on, but I'll never be ready to break this bond. Sorry couldn't for our sake just stay so long. Now I don't have someone to cry on the shoulder. I'm sad to tell you, I turned into a loner. I tried to be strong and to be a soldier, but I'm devastated our future is over. Now I don't want your memory to be taken in vain, but it feels like I'm slowly going insane. I tried to run from the pain, wanted to heal but my heart refrained. Kissing you was the closest I've been to heaven. How can losing you be some kind of lesson? But I try to make my peace and accept your life as a blessing. Loved you from the beginning, just confessing. Late at night my thoughts travel back to when you used to be mine. I miss the way you smiled and how that beautiful aura would shine. Been told I should move on, but I'm just not inclined. Could try, but no, I'd be wasting my time. How can I love you so much but still feel so hollow? This letter was printed with my tears and sorrow, but I need you to listen, so I'll be writing again tomorrow. Now I know that for every beginning that there's an ending. My heart's beating, but it ain't ever mending. Can't move on, so my mind will forever be bending, and my love I'll still be sending. Careful now who I'll get close to. I can't open up again because I lost you. I found myself being repeatedly hostile, cause our mistakes regrettably cost you. I'm constantly swimming in all my regrets. Lights dimming in me, but the fight hasn't left. To please you is why I even envision what's next. Not gonna lie though, it feels like God's ultimate test. Life really is what you make it out to be. I mastered my silence to spread positivity. Remain calm while a quiet storm is brewing in me.
I started by talking about when I was on that panel at North High, and how I had heard for the first time serious Chicano poetry by a young slam poet. And it occurred to me, and I believe this with all my heart, that as times change, as issues change, as we continue to go in the 21st century, you know, modes of transportation are gonna change. They're gonna change, they're gonna evolve. There are new issues, you know, there are new issues that I spoke of earlier. And these young people remind me that this is the new game in town, okay? And we need to keep pace with that. We don't need to forget about our contributions, but we need to make room for the new word, you know, and the new word is what these young folks are telling us. And if we don't allow that to happen, if we, there's an old saying, I think that John Kennedy said, that if you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. So we need to open the door. We need to bring people in with us, and you can't walk in and slam the door behind you. This is the future. This is the future. And I'm very optimistic about it, because I talk to a lot of young people when I go to the high schools, and I'm very impressed with their embrace of all of humanity, not just their own people, you know. So thank you for that. And again, like I said, poetry is visceral. That was a very heartfelt, probably hard for you to do, poem, because I'm sure it means so much to you. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Frank, you're up.
I think going first to master about the same thing.
Yeah.
Now to measure up. My name's Frank Arteaga. I've been in public community for 69 years. And my wife, we've been married for over 50. That's a blessing. And we have 3 kids. And we try to do everything with them so they would not be even influenced by the gangs. Because you don't have to join the gang, but you can be influenced through safety, intimidation, you name it. In itself, the gangs are not that bad. You know, I don't affiliate with them. The district attorney says, I bet you know a lot of gang members. I said, just the shot callers. Those are the people you want to deal with, you know, and it doesn't happen too often. But this is an article in the Pueblo Chieftain. It's about 1919 when they hung 2 Chicanos from the West 4th Street Bridge. And they were accused of shooting a sheriff or a deputy. His name was Jeff Evans, and they called and said, there's a riot down in Bessemer, you know. You need to get, so they left the jail, the doors open. So they grabbed these 2 Mexicanos, and one was supposed to be the first cousin of Pancho Villa. He deserves to be hung. But when they put the ropes around their necks and they threw them over the rail, their necks didn't break. So they strangled to death. And the governor at that time was Governor Shue. And he wrote this article. He says, if you want to know what happened there, and you need to know that the paper orchestrated that by their sensationalism, he angered the people. So a mob went down there and grabbed him, you know, he's just, and if I'm correct, there was no statute of limitations on murder, am I right?
Yes.
You didn't have a trial, no witnesses, all the things are necessary to clear yourself. So their anger was already fueled because Pancho Villa had invaded the United States. Pancho Villa was quite a dude, you know. Emiliano Zapata was even better. He was really, his heart was with the people. But the second article I have here is the Texas Rangers. I'll leave this up here, you know, you look at it. But the Texas Rangers, you talk about ethnic cleansing? My mom said they used to shoot Mexicans in the back like dogs. And they wouldn't shoot all of them, so they dug the grave to hide the bodies. You know, this is like a pre-Ukraine, you know. And then the guys that dug the hole, oh, can we go now? They shot them, threw them in the hole, you know. And it's just incredible that we ignore, you know, what has happened to our people over the centuries. I try to paint murals with the kids, you know, because you have to tie the kids into what we're doing. They need to grow up and realize that there's chances for them, educational, employment, college, whatever they want to do, they can do. And this teacher was asking a question one time. My wife's been a teacher, was a teacher, will always be a teacher for 32 years. And she says, I want to ask you, Mr. Arteaga, why does these little kids start using the F word all the time? They're only in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and they're, you know? And I says, I asked the Chicano kid that one time, and he says, for us Chicano kids. That's how we say that word. What I made, so, anyway. We talked a little bit, somebody mentioned Abelardo Delgado's style of poetry, and oh man, he was just awesome. He was an influence as well as Ricardo LaFore, who was in prison for 25 years for shooting a man. They asked him for a quarter, and he insulted him for 25 cents to say he could get another bottle of wine. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. So they shot and killed him, and both of them were sentenced to prison. And he wrote his book called The Black Sun. And in The Black Sun were things that I related to. And I did find a picture of Abelardo Delgado at our conference when we had Chicanos United for Action at the university. And it was successful, it was great, it was good, you know, education, immigration, health, you know, it was just something good. And we published a book that had all the panel discussions, what they talked about, what they suggested to improve on those things. It was fantastic. 2,500 Chicano students came from all of Colorado to listen to our poets and listen to our speakers and listen to the penitentes and listen to the, you know, the ex-pintos. It just kept going and going. And it was great. Whether it happened again, I don't know. But Ricardo Mora influenced me a lot. And also, like I say, Abelardo Delgado. And this is something I wrote probably 20, 30 years ago. Con permiso. I'm not a chuco, a pocho, a jaro, or a bato loco. I'm not a fighter, a picker, a bull hauler, or a pinto. I'm not an Indio, a Spaniard, a bullcheater, or a tequila drinker. I'm not a skeptic, a schemer, a scapegoater, or a saber-toothed tiger. I'm not a faker, a fuffer, and a farmer, or a speech shiner. And I'm not a sensible man when I become a writer. And what this does for me is it gives me the opportunity to write, you know, and I encourage you to write. Do your poetry, have your pencil on your pads and pen. And so anybody here ever have a thought, it's poetic and it's creative, and you didn't write it down? No. You need to do that. And with the advent of cell phones, you know, you can do your thoughts and stuff on your cell phone. This one is called Unmotivated. It's about noon and another day of 9 to 5. For some it starts at 8 and the others 7. It's the end of the shift. Our routine stops, our reflexes slow down to a trickle, and the mind shuts out that nucleus drive. I become a supple mass of hesitation, guided by centrifugal neons flashing the message over and over again. Get off the couch. And your poetry, I thought, you know, it doesn't have to be long and drawn out and how your dog died and you wept for days. So I wrote these 3 definitions. Of pain is the first one. Something you feel sometimes extreme. It hurts, then it doesn't. Cussing sort of helps, but not always. Fear. Tension grips your mind, a change you have to cope with. It ends eventually, but not always. Realization. I know that you know that I know. We know what we know. Now we both know. What are we going to do now? Amen.
People don't just people can start writing, but there's always something that happened to you, or there's a person or a poet or a poem that kind of you know, inspired you, you know. So I'd like to ask the poets to talk a little bit about somebody that you remember, or a poem that you remember that kind of changed it for you, that made you want to continue. Why don't we start with you, Antonio?
Okay. I can't recall a poem exactly, but a big inspiration for me was just a lot of the music that I listened to, the Chicano music, and then we used to watch the like old Chicano movies like Blood In, Blood Out, and then there was a lot of other ones that I seen too. My grandpa used to always watch just the old shows, so just all of those, like, it really inspired me. And then I guess more for me, it was more rap music that had inspired me. I couldn't think of, now that I'm older, I can't say that I have somebody that like inspires me, because I try to stick to my own style particularly, but like mainly, I guess I could say like Tupac. He was like a big prolific writer, and he also did a lot of other things. He did poetry, he also did like ballet and stuff like that too. He did a lot of different things when he was alive.
Yeah.
And yeah, that'd be one for me.
Cool.
One thing I forgot to mention earlier, because we were speaking earlier about somebody who inspired you. Definitely Rita was one of my first inspirations, because she took me to these testimonies in Denver at the state capitol, and I would get all fancy suited up, and then I would go up and try to talk and negotiate with the representatives, the state representatives. And it seemed like a battle we were never gonna win. It seemed like all the odds were against us every time, and me and Rita didn't think the holiday would end in our lifetime, but it did. But while it was still a holiday, I wrote a poem about it. So, and then some of my other influences are kind of like similar to his, with rap music. Immortal Technique was a huge influencer, because he was just so real. Some of it was sad, some was happy, some uplifting. It was a little bit of everything. And I remember I wanted to be just like him. So it's crazy how that's what happened, because before I ever rapped, I heard Immortal Technique and was like, dang, I wish I was that good. And so now I do have a lot of fans who, some of them say they listen to me every day. I don't even listen to me every day. I don't know if I like my music. But there's people who are really into it, and they jam it out daily. So I know that the poetry, it definitely touches them some kind of way. Let me see. So yeah, those are my influences.
Right.
I can add on to mine too, like
Yeah.
my mother and father were a big influence to me too. My father, he used to write poetry a lot. That's one thing that he had like slowed down on. Because with poetry, with writing in general, you can write things into your life. Like it depends on what you write about, but when you write about future things and you're foretelling and you're writing about things that can come, like you can literally write things into existence. Yeah.
Writing is one of those things that the more you do it, the better you get at it. Yeah. All right. Like I said, I've been a fan of poetry since I was 16, and I just happened to find something that I'd written around it. God, this is awful. I said, this is terrible. I wrote this, you know, but I got better. And I had, you know, the Chicano movement really was a turning point for me, because instead of reading Walt Whitman and Carl Sandburg, I started reading Carlos Fuentes and Octavio Paz and Pablo Neruda and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and those people, you know, because I wasn't used to it. So it really inspired me to say, you know, we are capable of writing really good stuff. And so I worked at it. I worked at my craft. I guess, like so many people here, Lalo Delgado, like Frank was talking about, was one of my inspirations, because he was such a prolific poet. And once I was doing a conference in Las Animas on La Raza Unida party elections that were going to happen in 1970. And I had to go to the church council to ask for permission to use the hall. and they made me, write down a list of all the people who were going to speak, and they wanted to be able to accept or reject. So I gave them all the names. I mean, there were some heavy people there, Freddie Granales, Corky, El Gurule, I mean, some heavy people, Marty Serna, and Lalo was gonna read poetry, and the church council said, well, everyone on this list is perfectly okay with us, except for Lalo Delgado. And I was taken aback, because Lalo is the most religious, the most Catholic, the kindest, gentlest soul you could ever possibly hope to find, and they were afraid of this guy. I said, why? It didn't make any sense. And then, when I had one of those moments that alcoholics call them, boom, a flash, I said they were afraid of the poet, because the poet is so powerful in terms of trying to convince and persuade and incite and inspire and inspire people. And I said, that's it. They're afraid of the poet. They're not afraid of these other guys. They're afraid of the poet, even though he was, like I said, the most gentle man you could ever find. So I became a fan of poetry in the sense that I decided on that day that poetry is a powerful way of communicating your feelings and the feelings of other people and the feelings of a cause or just an entire people. And I assumed then that poetry was the eternal enemy of tyranny. And I remember writing that down, because I said, I never want to forget this. Poetry is the eternal enemy of tyranny. And I believe that then, I believe it now. And I've seen a lot of stuff change because of the poets, If you know anything about Lorca, in the Spanish Civil War, Lorca was a powerful poet who was, what happens to a lot of poets is they get murdered, they get assassinated by tyrants and dictators, So so that's to me we were talking about my inspiration. I would say that Lalo Delgado is probably more responsible as a person, for my love of poetry, and the Chicano movement is more responsible than anything by taking up poetry as a means of protest or as a means of just making my feelings known. Your hero or your inspiration?
Well, Lalo Delgado changed my life. I had the opportunity to meet him when I was in Denver at su teatro. And he was just so vibrant and alive. I mean, when he was on stage, he wasn't reading his poem, he was performing it. And that's when I learned, I don't want to read poetry, I want to perform on stage. I want to make people cry, I want to make them laugh, or at least think about what I'm talking about. And earlier at CSU Pueblo, I mentioned Lorna D. Cervantes, who I was also fortunate enough to meet at CSU Pueblo. And she's a mentor of mine now. And she wrote a poem that is a one-word poem, and it tickled me that, is it Tony?
Yeah, Tony.
He got the poem after a while. It was like, oh, now I get it. But I didn't get it at first either. Her one-word poem is titled, Why I Hate Cinco de Mayo. And the one word, the poem, is course. And maybe you don't get it, but if you've been to a Cinco de Mayo in Denver at La Raza Park or Denver Civic Center, it's all about the booze. Forget about the culture and the history. It's a place to party and get drunk. And so that was Lorna's poem. She didn't have to preach. She was so simple, one word. That's all she had to say.
Less is more.
Less is more. I like it.
Actually, real hardcore Chicano activists in Denver, we call Cinco de Mayo the Stinko de Mayo. Because, it isn't just the Coors. All of corporate America has hijacked our culture now. Yeah. If they can make money at it, the Dia de los Muertos, have you seen it lately? Yeah. It's everywhere. It's at Ross, it's at Walmart, it's at everywhere, you know. And then for Cinco de Mayo, la cerveza más fina, or Tecate, the official sponsor of Cinco de Mayo. You know, it's corporate America is getting rich on our culture, and I guess you can't be manipulated if you know you're being manipulated. You know, I've always felt like that. I know you can't manipulate me because I know you're trying to do that. Anyway, but I love that one word poem, Coors. Como no? Frank, your inspiration, my man.
Thank you, brother. As president of the Marqueados Unidos,
Marqueados
you're a
Unidos.
bad kid, you know. Had to resign because I just wasn't doing enough bad things.
Shame.
Speaking about Bernardo Delgado, he does a poem entitled Stupid America. Stupid America! You see that Chicano with a steady knife on his hand? He doesn't want to cut you. He wants to sit in the sun and cry Christ figures. But you won't let him. Stupid America, you see that those Chicanos shouting curses in the street, there are poets without pencil and paper. Stupid America, you see that little Chicanitos funking your math, science, and your English? They are Picassos of your western states, and they will die with 1,000 masterpieces hanging from their mind. Stupid America. I think it's important. I think we need, you know, I could probably put together some kind of a book, you know, but, and then what? I got poetry all over the place. Prose. I only tagged up one time, and it was against the Coors boycott. And we were on the campus, and I was president of the Chicanos United for Action. So I knew that they were going to bring Coors back on campus. And Martin Cerna says, and I had Martin Cerna, Eddie Montour, Al Goulet, and Lugs, Louis the Lugs. They were pissed off because we didn't try to confront them on bringing Coors. And all these students, they know jack about the Coors boycott because they hired scabs. So I got this black spray paint, no Coors, Nazi signs, run over to this wall, no Coors, no Nazi signs. You know, it was one of the worst things that I could have done without. And that's how much I felt for the boycott against Coors. And so he says, Frank, he says, you got to get out there and stop that truck when he comes in. My understanding was going to be at 4 o'clock. And get some rocks or something. Stop them! And I said, shit, I'm going to try and hijack a Coors truck with a bunch of cake in it.
With rocks.
Yeah, I did. All right, so I went out there like un pendejo in the other, waiting for the damn Coors truck to come, and it never came, man. You know, I had rocks and everything. Hey, I was ready. So I went to a 5 o'clock wait. I said, shit. They delivered the beer at 6 o'clock that morning. They knew that there could be some kind of a bed out. But
That's very, very typical of this kind of stuff that used to happen back there. This is before you guys' time, but there was always the possibility of violence, you know, and it was hard for guys like me who were students of Cesar Chavez, who was very anti violence. And Corky, on the other hand, was a street Chicano from Denver who said, hey, I believe in self-defense. You hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. Now Chavez was completely different. Chavez says, I don't care if they hit you, you don't hit back. You don't hit back. And that was, and so I used to kind of have to ride the fence a little bit. If I was director of the Colorado Mine Council, and a lot of my clients were older religious farm workers, you know. You couldn't talk to them about that, you know, they were very conservative. And so I used to have to change my rap regularly, you know, I used to have to say, what, who you talking to, who you talking to? And that's how I survived all those years, you know, but what Frank talks about is that there was always the possibility for violence, and those were some really those are some really, difficult times, but, we survived it and, well, as you know, some people died. You know, we have martyrs in the movement. But it is, I thank Frank for bringing that up because it's the kind of thing that we don't like to talk about, but it's history. And history is history. You can't whitewash history. We've had enough of that. You know, we tell it like it is with all the warts and all. And that's one of the things that Corky's poem does, is it tells it warts and all. You know, we do things that we're ashamed of, or we should be ashamed of, but we move on, okay? And did you have something that you wanted to? Oh, okay.
Time?
Before we leave, I always like to ask if there's one question or two questions that you have. It's really my favorite part of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions? If not, thank you for coming. I hope that we can do this again sometime. And if we do, that you'll tell your friends. If you enjoyed this, you know, tell your friends, let's go down. It's you know, it's never too late to get involved and to do something. And those of you young people, if you don't write poetry, how do you know? You might have a poem inside of you, it's just dying to come out, you know, okay? It's just dying to crawl out. Poetry, remember, is our thoughts and feelings that are put to words. And you can say a word, and there are a lot of people who can't speak well, but they write very well, okay? So always remember that. And poetry is a good outlet. It's a good way to make your point, and it's a good way you can make a difference, okay? So thank you all for.
I have one comment. You know, and I'm sorry I was so late, I had something else that I had to get done, but, I said on the earlier one, I would like to see us bring back Chicano poetry. I would like to see a class at the university campus. And maybe it's like working with you to set up a syllabi. I don't know if you're doing teaching classes, if you could do Zoom class, or, I know you don't live in Pueblo.
I'll certainly think about that.
You know, it's like it's something that, you know, I could work with you on, because I think it's an important I think it needs to go into the high schools.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
I
to the
totally
middles,
agree.
you know, to where, you know, it's an expression.
Totally
And I
agree.
see some of our Chicano studies, you know, I'm looking at expanding, and I see the arts, poetry, music, being a fundamental part of that. And I remember the old I was young at that time, and probably during the same time you were young, where, I used to see the old jams.
Yeah,
You know, like, one person get up and they'd say their stuff, another person get up, and, you know, it was wonderful. And there was always that message to the community, that message about the pain, the emotion, and even what was going on regarding the community. I knew Lalo, I had the opportunity to work with him, I loved him, and he was one of also the first people that really ignited my interest, because he spoke about the Chicano poetry, and then of course Corky's.
I
famous.
totally agree, I completely agree that we need to have something like that. It's remember, our people are not just janitors or work at the steel mills or work in beets and onions. Our people, when you know your true history, our people were scientists, astronomers, physicians, poets, artists. It's just been kind of kept from us. We just didn't know about it, because it's in the society's best interest to keep you ignorant about yourself. But one of the things that Chicano movement did is, when we found out our newfound identity, we started writing and painting and we became mainstream. But even now, people still think that we're just political and that we're not really true, and that the art that we practice is not true art, okay? Legitimate art, it's all political. Well, there isn't a more political artist than Pablo Picasso, I mean, you know. So, you know, if you believe that, then just keep it going, keep it going. You have a proud history, you have a proud heritage, keep it going. Yeah.
I have one comment. I work here at the museum with the kids, I teach art with the kids, and they need more of this. We used to have a really great instructor, a professor, from the college in Colorado Springs, and she passed away. So the kids need more poetry and art, and, you know, I know you're focusing on the indigenous, and we have indigenous art, like, we have different things that, different cultures for these kids, but we don't have poetry right now, so, like, if you can make a video or come do a little insert, or if we could share something with them, you know?
I'll keep in touch with
Yes, please.
with Judy.
There's a lot to be done.
From the little kids to the big kids.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'd like you to do before we close is give these people a round of applause, because they don't do this for money. We don't have a program. If this were Mexico, there would be 200 people in this room that would have paid $25 each to be here. But this isn't Mexico. So, and we've got 14 people here, so that's really cool. So.
I do this for
Thank
money,
you
I
all
made
for-
40
thank you all
bucks
for
today.
And I was a little late because I have homie care. And they don't show up, so they're either in jail or, you know, but anyway, it's a new corporation.
I want a picture, Debbie in there, and I'll be there.
And guys, I don't know if you recognize our leader, Judy Baca. She is a professor of Chicano studies at the university. And she's one of the sponsors for this. And she paid for the cookies. Is this good enough?
Go ahead, behind the panel.
Closer?
Yeah, if you can get closer to. Go ahead, Frank, go ahead.
Please.
Was that videoing?
Maria's taking a picture.
Okay, hugs.
I wanna die standing, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, I keep noticing. Thank you.
You know what you get when you cross the Mexican with an octopus? Your house roofed in 1 hour.
Hang on.